Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode.
He's back!
Today's episode is a little bit different, so I'm gonna begin with a, shall we say, disclaimer. This show, I'm never gonna tell you that this show is not a political show, or it's not a religious show, or it's not whatever. This show is whatever we need it to be. Truth be told, nothing is gonna be held sacred on this show, except for, of course, the Bible. The Bible is the standard which we measure everything else against. And so if it doesn't hold up to that, it ain't worth considering.
Nice.
Because of that, everything else is up for discussion. Anyways, with that out of the way, I'm Gavin Waples, and you are part of the shift. Now, today's episode kind of sprang from a lot of things we're seeing in just the regular sphere of culture nowadays. It's well known by this point that a lot of things that happen in our government, in our schools, and really just a lot of things in general are basically inputted by mob rule. There's a very loud minority of people that are getting their way. That's not how the government's been set up. That's not how we run things in America. That's not even godly, to be completely honest. Maverick, no. So I know a lot of us have seen this happening in our culture because it's everywhere. Really, DEI is in everything. If you're watching the show like us, you're probably against it, right? That's part of the whole breaking woke thing. But even a lot of our pushback when we're against it is verbal. There's not a lot of active resistance out there anymore. Now, when I say active resistance, I'm not talking about standing up with guns or whatever, because I know a lot of people would be willing to do that. That is our Second Amendment right, and that's part of the reason we have our guns, is so if the government decides to do something haywire, that the people have the power to say no in every respect. But there's also been systems put in place to where we don't have to get to that point. There's a lot of people that only would stand up if it ever got to that point. They've done nothing as far as legally or gone to any sort of representation other than their vote for the president. But by golly, if it came to war, well, they'd be there with their 13 guns.
And they call me the most armed man in America. I have over 4,000 weapons in my name, over 200 machine guns. I have mortars, bazookas, tanks, half-tracks, attack jeeps, flamethrowers.
And that's not a bad thing. We do need people that would be willing to go the farthest they would go. But we need people even more now that would stand up before that comes to that point. Really, the best way to win a war is not through bloodshed. It's through never having to fight in the first place. I'm not a pacifist, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't fight if the government comes to take our stuff away, because we should. It's part of our rights. But we should change the government before it ever has to be that way. We should be involved in our government. Like writing to your local congressman has become a cliche, now, but really it's a right that we have that we should be able to enact. It's not the only thing we can do either, because recalls is a very big thing, and it hasn't happened a lot, but it's a possibility. It's another thing that if your government official is going against what they've been elected on the premise of doing, recall them.
We can get recalled.
It's a thing. And even if none of those immediate actions work of changing the current elected official, our election cycle resets every couple years. So re-elect a better one next time. There's a lot of things that we can do. The power is in our hands as a people, and not just because we have guns, because that's how the government is set up. A lot of times what happens for people is it's too inconvenient. We don't have the time in our weeks to campaign for a petition or write a letter a week to our congressman making sure there's change, even though that would be effective. We just don't do it. And I'm not sure why. There's probably a number of reasons to that, but we can't simply expect to vote for the president every 4 years and hope things will change in our favor. In the end, the president doesn't have the power to change the whole government. And that's a good thing. We don't want that. We don't want the president to be able to just change everything on will. But that means we have to be involved in a whole lot more areas in our government than just voting for the president every 4 years. We need to be actively, researching who these better senators are. Check out their campaigns, not just their campaigns. Here's something that we should be doing with really every elected official, is we should be checking out what they've done previously, not just what they are campaigning on, but what what they have actually done in previous terms. If they haven't done anything, check what their policies are and compare it, whatever. Point is, we need to be doing a lot more research and actually putting people in that align with our values as Christians and as, people that support the nation of America being a great nation like it's supposed to be, and a godly nation. The power of the government is very much in our hands still, and we can't just elect a new president and hope that everything's going to work out. Here's an example of that actually happening just this year. I mean, not like maybe a month ago. It was March 13th is when this video came out. There's a video of this school in Illinois where a mother had a middle school daughter in a gym class, and there was a trans girl. So there was a boy who thought she was a girl, or there was a boy who thought he was a girl and was saying as much in the girls' locker room. And this middle school girl, understandably, was very uncomfortable and decided not to change until that person was gone. And with many of her friends, actually, decided we're not going to change until this individual is gone. Not even saying much. I mean, they talked to the teacher later. I shouldn't say that. They didn't talk to the teacher later. The teacher then called them in and had a discussion with them about bigotry or whatever. And then the next day, they go into this class, and the same student is still there, changing in the locker room. But this time, 3 adult members of this school, I don't remember if they were teachers or if the president was there, principal was there. But these 3 adult people told these girls to change anyway, even though they were uncomfortable. Now, there's a whole video that you can watch, and I'm going to put a link down underneath this video, which you should go watch. And this is directly their school board meeting. You'll hear the story directly from the mother. It's terrible. I mean, by all objective standards, that's a terrible thing to happen. You may be surprised to learn that this school board meeting was filled not with parents who were equally outraged, because remember, this is one student versus a whole class of other girls. This mother stood by herself, except for the room was filled with trans activists from across the state, not even from the same town as this kid. And this is after we've elected Trump into office, and he put an executive order in place specifically to keep stuff like this from happening. That is evidence enough that the president cannot be your saving grace. This mother did what we should be doing, and she went to the school board and presented her case, but she was alone. No one else stood with her. I can't help but thinking that would be the case in many, many more places. Even though the majority of people side with this mother and side with what is right, keeping biological men away from biological women in the locker rooms and bathrooms, but no one came and supported her. In fact, the opposite side came and supported their agenda, which was completely anti-God and really anti-law. And again, this would happen in probably any of our towns that we live in right here, right now, even in rural North Dakota, Montana area. How many times have you seen a post on Facebook of Laura Lane or whatever? I don't know. I think that's probably a DC character, and I just spat that out there. How many times have you maybe seen on Facebook, someone posting a call to action of, oh, we need to go make sure you go vote on this measure, or make sure you go to this school board meeting but most of the time that doesn't happen. People don't actually act on it. They just talk about it. And maybe you're not one of those people, but there are many people like that, and too many people like that, of the silent majority. People who would actually side with this mother but don't do anything about it. But the other side is doing something about it, and that's part of the reason they're getting their way. They're able to be loud. But here we are, just talking about it and then expecting things to change. It's a totally spoiled mentality. This can even be a problem with Christians. We get into this greasy grace mentality of, we become a Christian, and then now everything we do is covered by grace. So we just go and live life the way we used to do it, maybe with a few minor upgrades. And then life plunges into chaos around us, and we call out, God, why aren't you here to save me? But again, there's a lot of stuff that we should be able to just deal with. That's part of the freedom we have in America, and the power we have as believers is we can make change on our level. We can't just keep pushing all our problems away and our responsibilities and saying, no, somebody else help me. Somebody else deal with it. Save me, Mr. President. Save me, Pastor. God save me, I'm in another mess again. When most of the time, it's a mess of our own making, and we can just simply fix it. We have to start doing something and taking action towards what we already know to be right. Think about the story of David. David went out against a giant. And here's the thing about David. He came to the battlefield to deliver food to his brothers, and then he gets there and he hears a voice crying blasphemy against God and the armies of God. And he's like, excuse me, what?
Because I heard him first. I said, hold on. I said, hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
And he takes what he had in his hand, which was just a sling, and he goes and kills the giant. I'm sure he wasn't the only one on the army that thought that giant was blaspheming God. But even though they had swords and armor and weapons of war, nobody did anything. They sat there silent and hid. And then when David actually went and did something, he killed the giant because he acted on what he knew to be right, and he acted on his faith. We cannot stay silent and inactive like those soldiers, and like so many of us are. If we want to see a true culture shift, things got to get done. I'm also reminded of the story of the talents. Jesus tells this story, and maybe I'll turn to it. Jesus tells this story in Matthew 25, which you'll know is the parable of the talents, and I'm just going to read it here. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. Likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you've delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received the 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you had not sown, gathering where you have not scattered seed, and I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received my own back with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given. He will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. So all of them were given something by their master to do something with. And the one with 5 did, and the one with 2 did. But the one that was called wicked and lazy was the one who did nothing with something he did have, even though it was small. He said it would have been better if you would have done something that only got a very little profit, the interest, than to do nothing with what I had given you. But instead, he did nothing and was called wicked and lazy. I personally believe there are many of us that would be considered wicked and lazy when the reaping time comes. Even simple actions like talking to people about Jesus, or not being afraid to talk with people about what is right and presenting a truthful view to people is very small, but it is worth something. It's the bare minimum we should be doing. And there's a lot more we could be doing and probably should be doing, especially in today's age. Going to school board meetings, going to city council meetings, voting for more than just the president. We have to be doing something, because if we don't do something, then this nation's going to fall. And that fall is going to end up being on our hands.